As a huge Robert Pattinson fan, I watched Mickey 17 on the day it came out, and the way I felt about that film is literally the embodiment of Rob and Bong Joon-ho doing that joint heart thing across the press tour, which basically means I really liked it and I thought it was super fun. And whilst watching it, it had some themes that really reminded me of certain books. So in this video, I'm going to be recommending books to you that I think that you would like if you also enjoyed Mickey 17. I'm going to try and make this as spoiler-free as possible if you haven't seen the film yet, and I'm just going to be referencing things that have been shown in the trailer. And if you're new here, hi, welcome, I'm Katerina. I make new videos yapping about books every single Tuesday, and if that's your jam, why not subscribe? Okay, so if you haven't seen the film yet, I'm going to give you a very quick spoiler-free rundown. This is a sci-fi thriller movie that's directed by Bong Joon-ho, the same director that made Parasite back in 2019. And it's based on the novel called Mickey 7, written by Edward Ashton, which I actually do have the book, but I just haven't got around to reading it yet. And we follow a guy called Mickey, who is an expendable, which basically means whenever he dies, a new clone of himself gets printed out along with his memories. This is literally the printed skin of an expendable, Bella. He's then sent to a colony of workers to colonize an ice planet as Earth is becoming inhabitable and just a rubbish place to live due to financial and climate issues, which was a little bit unsettling to watch a film that was really starting to mirror our own reality, but we move. And in the film, we follow the 17th version of Mickey, Mickey 17, who essentially refuses to die, which leads to conflicts and existential dilemmas. The story explores identity, self-worth, and what life means when it's finite. Okay, so I'm going to be splitting these books into 4 categories of what I thought were the most prominent themes in the film. And starting off with perhaps the most obvious one, the first category we have is space travel, as Mickey and his colony travel for almost 5 years in order to reach this alien planet. And first here is a book that I actually just read last month, and that's A Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams. This is a satirical science fiction novel that follows your average British bloke and his alien friend, who is a researcher writing a book about galaxy hitchhiking, and he's been stuck on Earth longer than he intended to. The Earth gets destroyed at the start of the story because, obviously, this is science fiction in the 70s, and the book is essentially their adventure hopping from different spaceships to different planets. It's heavy in themes of absurdity, the random nature of life, and the search for meaning. Apart from the obvious that these both include space travel and a mix of bizarre characters, both of these stories incorporate humor, as The Hitchhiker's Guide is full of satirical and absurd comedy. And despite both books having tragic situations, one guy dying over and over again and others being left homeless after the Earth gets destroyed, both stories use a lot of wit and humor to line up the narrative, and there are some pretty laugh-out-loud moments, as they both include some wacky and wonderful characters, both human and alien. I also found both of these stories to have parallels in the exploration of identity and existence. Both protagonists have these internal struggles, grappling with their place in the universe and what is the meaning behind their lives. And another classic science fiction novel with a protagonist grappling with these big issues that includes interstellar travel is Dune by Frank Herbert. You've more than likely seen this film, including my love Timothée Chalamet, but if you haven't, this story takes place in a far, far future, centered on the son of a noble family. And the emperor of this galactic empire sends him and his family to another planet, where they've been made to take control of the spice production, which is the most valuable substance in the entire universe. And this book is very heavy in themes of politics and religion, especially because this son becomes the messiah amongst the natives and essentially leads them to rebel against the emperor's oppressive regimes. Again, even with space travel aside, there are loads of similarities here to Mickey 17. Dune is a very heavily political novel, and it focuses on how the corrupt few can abuse the system in order to gain more power, control, and wealth. Which is mirrored in Mickey 17. We also have this corrupt and pretty fascist tyrant running the spaceship. I know this isn't confirmed, but I did get a good kick out of this leader essentially being a parody of Donald Trump. He's a wealthy and corrupt politician who loves himself and the cameras and makes these really long and ridiculous speeches, and all of his most devoted followers wear red caps. When I was in the cinema, I had to question whether I walked into the wrong Donald Trump biopic because this was too spot on. So, along with a tyrant as a leader, both of these stories really focus on rebellion and resistance against the corrupt few in power in order to save everyone as well as themselves. And my last book in this category also focuses on a protagonist trying to save themselves, and that's The Martian by Andy Weir. I actually haven't read this book yet, but it is on my TBR list because I actually really enjoyed the film. This is yet another science fiction novel, but I would honestly say this is more realistic, as we follow an astronaut who becomes accidentally stranded on the planet Mars. Everyone back home assumes he's dead, and he's left to survive on this planet completely alone. He uses his unique thinking and engineering skills to survive, learning to grow food and repair the spaceship, all while maintaining this hope to be saved. This novel is filled with suspense and science, all whilst exploring the human resilience and the fight to survive. I think the protagonists in these stories are quite similar, especially because despite their circumstances, characters, they both remain so positive and lighthearted. As both of the characters are full of humor and wit and charisma, they're both also surprisingly resourceful and have impressive problem-solving skills, because they both use their quick thinking and ingenuity to overcome life-threatening situations. And I would also argue that both characters undergo huge personal growth throughout. Whilst Mickey literally grows from a bunch of cells 17 times, which, not gonna lie, would not say no to 17 Robert Pattinsons, the Martian is also a changed person at the end compared to the start due to the things that they go through. Realistically, both characters need therapy because they've both undergone a lot of trauma. Moving on, the next theme that was very prominent in Mickey 17 was genetic modification. As in the future, there's this crazy technology that allows humans to create these expendable clones. And my first recommended book in this category is Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. This is a dystopian novel set in a future society with a very rigid social order and advanced technology. And the states here control every aspect of life, from genetic engineering to social conditioning. Happiness here is prioritized, and it's a warning of what can come from a pleasure-based society, where individuality and freedom are lost in order to focus on societal conformity. It's also a message of how technology can go too far when humans start to lose their humanity. I immediately thought of this book when watching the film. I thought it had so many similarities. Firstly, the dystopian elements both use this advanced technology in controlling people, which can lead to huge moral dilemmas, as both characters are very unhappy in how this technology is affecting them, as arguably they both lose their individuality as they're becoming another number in a sea of people, which leads into these further explorations of the characters' individual desires in compared to what the society or what the community expects of them. We therefore see both protagonists struggle when it comes to conforming with the collective and rebel against these corrupt systems that govern their lives. It also just ponders cool philosophical questions of where should we draw the line between scientific advancements and ethical considerations. And yet another book that explores this fine line is Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro. This is another dystopian novel, and it's set in England, and we follow the lives of 3 students at a very exclusive but weird boarding school, and the novel spans over from their childhood to their adult lives. And the kicker in this story is that we slowly begin to uncover the truth and reason behind their existence. The novel explores some quite deep themes of loss, the nature of humanity, and the moral complexities in society. Like with Mickey 17, this is the only book in this list that actually directly explores the ethical and existential issues of cloning. The types of cloning is different in each story, but it's interesting to see how the characters navigate this anyway. But as a result, I would say that the stories mirror each other because they're full of emotional depth, as we follow the psychological and emotional experiences of the characters, especially as they're undergoing a multitude of feelings, including romantic and platonic love and the search for meaning. It also very much explores the need for companionship and belonging, as both characters begin to feel isolated and lonely because of their conditions, and they end up finding meaning in connection with others. And my final book in this category that also explores the need for connection in lands of isolation is The Host by Stephenie Meyer. Don't let the fact that this is the author of Twilight put you off, because this book is so different to that. I was genuinely so obsessed with this book that I actually think I read it for every single summer for 6 years straight when I was younger because it was so good. This also feels very incredibly full circle. You know, we have Stephenie Meyer, Twilight, Edward Cullen, Robert Pattinson, and now Mickey 17. You know, it's all full circle. I know what I'm doing here. So this book also crosses over into the space travel category, as it's a science fiction novel where it's set in the world where aliens have come to Earth and they've essentially taken over human bodies and erased their consciousness. And the narrative is told by an alien inhabiting a human body. However, the host that she's taken up is still conscious. The alien therefore becomes sympathetic to the human's emotions and memories, and then seeks to find her loved one who are still human. The book is very much an exploration into this othering narrative of us versus them. Like with the other science fiction novels, I feel as though both these stories have an emphasis on survival in a hostile environment. In Mickey 17, he's literally thrown into an ice planet where he dies over and over again, learning to survive these harsh conditions. And in The Host, it's really unique because it's an alien on Earth, and we're getting an alien perspective of the difficult and harsh conditions on this planet. Another similarity is that they both explore these sort of dual existences side by side. In The Host, we have this alien and human fighting for the same body, and then in Mickey 17, we have Mickey fighting for his own soul body against his clone. There's also a huge theme of rebellion across both these stories too. In The Host, we see these humans rebelling against these aliens and fighting for their own survival. And then in Mickey 17, we see them challenging these corrupt leaders and the moral boundaries of cloning. I also feel like I need to flag, if you've seen the Host film, don't let that put you off the book, because I honestly thought that the film was awful. Please read the book. I think that it is so fun and interesting and unique, and it's one of those books I actually think about quite often. Moving on, the next category that was discussed perhaps more implicitly in this film is existentialism. As the film dives into the pits of what does it mean to be alive and how do we live knowing that our time here is finite. And first up in this category, we have No Longer Human by Osamu Dazai. This is a semi-autobiographical Japanese novel that follows a man who is very detached from the people around him, and he feels like he's constantly cosplaying a human being. And he masks this alienation through trying to people please others by almost being like the class clown in order to make them laugh in order to like him. And we follow him from childhood to adulthood in this journey of identity and loneliness as he goes through complex relationships, substance abuse, and struggles with his mental health. Based on this synopsis alone, I think it's quite obvious that both delve into the absolute pits of existentialism, as both of these stories really do raise the question of what does it mean to be human? And what is the purpose of living? And what do we really stay alive for? The protagonist, No Longer Human, dwells over these internal conflicts and really much searches for authenticity and constantly feels like he's pretending to be human in putting on this facade. And even though that this protagonist is very much depressed and a little bit boring, I would actually say that he does remind me of Mickey because he puts on this clownish facade to please others, and I feel as though that would probably come across as quite goofy and silly in the way that Mickey naturally is, even though that both of these characters actually feel very misunderstood and lonely and struggle to confide with other people. And I don't think this is a spoiler alert, but I've only just clocked now that both of these stories also include substance abuse, so that's an interesting similarity. But in a similar vein, another book that also explores this existential nature of life is Notes from Underground by Fyodor Dostoevsky. The novel is narrated by a man living underground in poverty, and we're essentially reading his musings. The first part of the book is set when he's an older man, and he's just essentially expressing his cynicism and discontent in society, where he claims himself to be superior to others because he's actually aware of his own misery and irrationality. And the second part of the book is basically him recounting past events from when he was younger, ultimately showcasing his inability to form meaningful connections and his withdrawal from society. Hear me out on why I felt that these were similar. I felt as though in both we were dealing with slightly unreliable narrators. The underground man's narrative is full of contradiction and cynicism as he's always going back on what he says. He goes on for pages and pages about how he's going to do one thing, and then in the moment he ends up doing the exact opposite. And then Mickey feels unreliable because his experience as a clone seems to blur his interpretation of reality. Can we really trust and rely on what he says when he's literally been printed out 17 times? These characters were also similar to me because they were both financially struggling. Mickey literally becomes an expendable due to money issues, and the other guy is literally living underground in poverty, which actually opens up a lot of discussions about class and wealth inequality, as both of these men have put themselves in actually dangerous situations because of financial burdens. And finally, the last book in this category, which I have actually just finished reading, is The Unbearable Lightness of Being by Milan Kundera. This is a philosophical novel set against the backdrop of the 1960s Prague Spring, and we follow a handful of intertwined lives, including married couples and secret lovers in other affairs. And the novel essentially explores these concepts of lightness and weight when it comes to making life decisions. We see what makes different characters feel light and heavy depending on the circumstances they're in and who they're with, as well as examining the impact of political events on these people's lives and how this affects their freedom and commitment. Once again, this goes into the absolute pits of existentialism, as this book, definitely more than the other two, really questions what it means to be alive. It really looks deep into our place in the universe and what we should personally hold weight and meaning to. The book also had some really interesting commentary on how we shouldn't be too hard on ourselves with the decisions we make in life, because this is literally our first time being alive. We have no other lives to compare our decisions to, which I think is interesting considering how Mickey has literally lived 17 times. The book also explores interpersonal relationships, as there's so many characters that affect each other here. And Mickey 17 also explores similar themes of love and infidelity, as we essentially have a love triangle here, which was kind of hilarious to watch because this is not the first love triangle that Robert Pattinson has acted in, and yeah, that's all I'm going to say on that. And finally, my last category here, which is one of my favourite genres, is survival. As despite dying multiple times, Mickey is trying to survive wherever he can. And coming up front and centre, we have Life of Pi by Jan Mattel. This is a philosophical novel about an Indian boy who ends up stranded on a lifeboat with a tiger for 227 days. This happens because his family owns a zoo and they decide to relocate to America, but their ship sinks during their journey due to a violently stormy night. The story is about survival, spiritualism, and how the nature of reality is perceived. This book is truly about survival against all odds as we follow a boy try and survive the most impossible conditions. Pi is literally stranded in the middle of the ocean, and Mickey is literally in a barren, frozen wasteland, so both places would be my absolute hell. And lo and behold, both characters use their ingenuity to overcome these circumstances. The book is also hugely philosophical, and to be honest, could probably go into the existential category, as this book really looks into faith and belief and the nature of reality. And like with Notes from Underground, I feel as though we also have an unreliable narrator here, as Pi is sort of telling this story within a story of all these animals. So it leaves you questioning the whole way of what is actually happening, and I actually do think that's quite a fun thing to have in books. And another book that focuses on survival in harsh environments is The Road by Cormac McCarthy. This is a post-apocalyptic dystopian novel that follows a father and his young son, and they struggle to survive in a world that's been destroyed by an unknown disaster. They journey through a desolate landscape of a burnt-down America, where their harrowing journey is constantly threatened by violence and starvation. Along with both these characters being in frozen wastelands struggling to survive, both stories have this very bleak but hopeful tone that runs throughout. The Road shows this very desolate world and highlights the importance of familial love in order to bring human strength and resilience. And Mickey 17 showcases this very bleak existence of being a clone over and over again till the end of time, but highlights the importance of romantic and platonic relationships in order to find community, which ultimately both show how humans find strength in companionship, as we are social creatures and we like to be with other people. I also thought that both stories were very much raw explorations into humanity and free will, and how what we choose as humans has everlasting impacts. And finally, my very last book in this category, and also this video, is the only non-fiction book on this list, and that's Miracle in the Andes by Nando Prado. This one well and truly sits on the throne of all survival stories because this literally happened. This is the true story of the 1972 Andes plane crash and rescue, where a plane originally carrying 40 people from Uruguay to Chile crashed in the Andes Mountains. And the book retells how the final 16 survivors lasted 72 days in these horrific conditions. I mean, ultimately, both these stories showcase the incredible human resilience and ingenuity when it comes to survival. It's actually amazing what humans can come up with to get through the most impossible conditions. Like, this group of men literally survived 72 days in a frozen mountain. How? It's really about survival against all odds, and that is just so impressive. Both narratives also explore why we keep on fighting and go on to stay alive, even though it would have been so easy just to give up. And the way that both stories explore how family and friends can have a bigger impact on you and your own life is honestly really inspirational. I actually talk about this book so often, but it's one of those books that genuinely changed my life, so I will be talking about it to the end of time. And there you have it, gang. Those are all the books that I think you'd enjoy if you also enjoyed Mickey 17. Have you read any of these books? And if so, did you enjoy them and see similarities with Mickey 17? And what other books do you think could go in these categories? Let me know, because I really like these genres and I want to read more books that kind of have similar themes. Feel free to drop a like down below if you enjoyed this video. It means the absolute world to me. And if you're new here and you've enjoyed hearing about me chat about books, then subscribe, because I make new videos every single Tuesday. Feel free to follow me on Goodreads, where I update what I'm reading in real time. And feel free to also follow me on my Instagram. I post more personal stuff on there, but I also post about books as soon as I finish reading them, letting you know what I rate them out of 10 and also what they're about. And once again, thank you so much for being here. I really hope that you've enjoyed Mickey 17 as much as I did, but if you've watched this anyway, then you are a true fan and I love you for that. And I will see you in the next one. Bye!